Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Contactlost, another part of our mini series Round Zero Pairings. And today we've got Dean from Team Australia,
G'day, guys. How are you?
and we've got Finn from Team New Zealand.
Hey, how you going?
So, southeastern hemisphere sort of vibes, very much. So, before we get into the stuff, let's thank our sponsors, the Army Painter and Weyland-Yutani, as well as our Patreons, without whom this wouldn't be possible. Right, so straight into it. Finn, did you take the trip last year, and what do you think of the results from last year?
No, so I didn't go last year. I spent a lot of my travel money on LVO and things like that, but it was really awesome to see how well New Zealand did the first year going last year.
Yeah, and do you know if there were any immediate takeaways from that event? Have you been in touch with the people that participated?
Yeah, so there's a few people who are coming back this year, and I think basically the consensus was that people just wanted to see New Zealand get to a point where a team goes every year as opposed to just a one-off.
Right, and well, you've managed to do that this year again. Hopefully, that stays a theme.
Yeah.
Dean, what about Team Australia? And again, the same question. Were you part of that team last year?
Yeah, so last year I participated as a coach for the team, and we performed really, really well. We came third overall, which was a fantastic result. So, really keen to get stuck into it as a player and as a captain this year. So, really, really excited for the trip. It's going to be fantastic.
Right, and about last year's event, did you have any immediate takeaways? Like, were you happy with the podium finish, or was there a little bit of like, I don't know, a feeling of, well, maybe not sadness, but about not defending the title?
Not at
Some
all. I mean,
disappointment, maybe?
it's always good to be able to go back to back, but who can complain about a podium finish, right? We also had a couple of people that were instrumental to the team achieving that podium result in the previous year that didn't attend. So being able to, drop off a couple of players, but still maintain that podium level performance just shows the depth of talent that we have here in Australia. And I'm really looking forward to bringing some even fresher talent in this year. So yeah, overall, massively positive vibes. And very happy with the podium.
All right. So speaking of bringing new faces, what was the process for this year's team selection, and how many candidates did you have?
We had about 30 applicants, and the process was pretty straightforward. Australia has some unique challenges when it comes to team selection because it's such a physically large country. We've got sort of pockets of players all over the place. So trying to, pull the best out of each one of those pockets can be somewhat challenging. So essentially our process is basically we reach out to all the people within the community, all the leaders within the community, spread the word, get as many applicants for people interested to participate as we can. And obviously being so far away from Europe, it's an expensive trip for us. So trying to make sure that, people that can afford the trip, that can commit to the, intense practice and build up, it can be quite hard to put together that team. But basically they all put in their applications, and then as captain, it's my responsibility to select the players. I did that by basically looking at their standings, looking at their placings, looking at performance in other team events, and then also, leaning on, some of the advice from those leaders within the pockets of community that we have around the country. And we basically went through and selected everybody based on that. The only exception to that was Matt Morrisoli, and Finn was present for this story, where basically there was a Oceanic Championship tournament that we attended. This was before team selection had started at all, and after the event where Matt Morrisoli was part of the previous team. And we were drinking quite heavily at this tournament, and I was basically trying to convince Matt to participate again and to come play with me. And he basically offered me a deal, which was that if I went to, there was like this water fountain in a lagoon in the middle of the venue. He basically convinced me that if I went and sat on the fountain, he would participate in the event. So I was like, yep, no worries. So I went and took my pants off and went and sat on the fountain. And as a result, he now has to fly to Europe and play with me. And so we have some non-conventional ways as well as some conventional ways of getting our players on board.
I believe your words were, "I owe this to the people of Australia."
Yes, it's like sometimes a captain just has to sit on a fountain. Like if that's what needs to be done in order to get the best team that we can, then
Yeah.
it's my responsibility to do so.
Taking one for the team gets a
Yeah.
whole new meaning here. Right. Well, okay. Hopefully that pays off for you. And did you have like stages in the selection? So let's say you've had your 30 applicants at, I don't know, October, let's say that. And then did you narrow down bit by bit, or all the 30
No,
people were fully involved and you picked the final 8?
I like
When?
to select the entire team in one go. And the reason that I do that is because then it really gets this sense that we are all one team. In previous years, they've had a process where like they'll select like the top 4, and then those
Mm-hmm.
top 4 will then select, the next 4 or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I found that one of the challenges that presents is you get sort of this separation within the team where you've got clearly the top 4 players, and then you've got the tail 4, you've got the last picks. I wanted to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that everybody was clear that we're all on the same level. So I had a lot of conversations with people in the lead up, basically sort of sussing out and figuring out who we wanted to select. But I announced the team all in one, and I spent the entire day calling each one of the applicants. We also have 4 coaches traveling with this year, which is fantastic. So calling all of those 12 participants and congratulating them and welcoming them to the team in one hit.
So was it all up to yourself, or did someone help you out in that process? Because having 30 people on board for such a long period of time and then taking the time to actually have the conversation with each one sounds like a bit time consuming for assumingly someone who also has a day-to-day job, or maybe not.
Yes, it was time consuming. Luckily, I get a fair bit of downtime in my day-to-day job, so I was able to have some of those conversations on the work dollar. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, that was like, so in terms of making the decision, I lent heavily on the community leaders to talk about, for example, that in Western Australia, I know some of the people over there, but not as well as I would like to. But I know that in our national championships, the Australian New Zealand team championships, the Western Australian team always performs really, really well. So I was like, I know there's some really talented players over there. I just don't know them well enough to sort of make that decision. So I got involved with the leader of their community. It was basically like, okay, who over there has got the right attitude? Who over there has got the skills and the experience? And we basically came to conclusions together. And then I did a similar thing here in Victoria as well as in other states.
Okay. Right. And Finn, what did the process look like for New Zealand?
So we had an application process where people could apply basically to be either a coach, player, or apply for both roles. Then we had an application window of about a month where people basically we asked about what team event experience they had. Obviously some people had been to the previous WTC. A lot of people have played the Australia New Zealand team champs, which is an 8-man teams event every year. And then like we often run 5-man team events, and then also looked at singles events. And I basically went through all of the applications and then spoke to the previous captain as well, just to go through a bunch of like ideas, how players were, all that sort of thing. And then we selected a wider squad, where a few people were straight away selected as coaches because we thought that they would be really be better for us as coaches. Not that they're not good enough as players, but just the way that they like analyze data and those sorts of things really showed like promise as a coach. And then we had a group of 11, which we were picking the playing team from, and then the rest would coach.
Okay, so that brings a total of how many people in the team?
We were 14, but we've had a couple of people who had to drop out for unforeseen reasons. So, and I guess it's one of those things that always happens, but if you can get the numbers up, especially because we travel so far, it is, it's great if you can get that sort of commitment from people.
Yeah, definitely, and that's why I was asking. So you've managed to bring some coaches this year, so definitely that's also like an improvement. And people going for the second time, that shows dedication to representing the team playing little plastic dollies. Right. Any events under the national flag? I mean, I guess you're a bit far off in the world by yourselves in a way, but there is at least the Australia-New Zealand team championships, right? So, uh, was that like pivotal to the team selection?
So we had selected our Australian team before that event, but we
Okay.
did look at historical results for that team's event. It was really exciting to see this year, however, though, that a number of the players that I had selected were on the winning team and the team that came second this year. So it shows that, confirms that selection process did result in us getting very strong players. So.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the main one. There are a few smaller, like the 5-man team events that we had some down in New Zealand that we sent some Australian players to, and they send their players up as well. So there's a lot of collaboration between New Zealand and Australia in that regard. It's sort of the only real opportunity we have, and then obviously we've got your big events like your LVOs, your World Champions of Warhammer. Those sorts of bigger singles events are also a great place where we can see what people perform like under those more high pressure environments.
Okay, so but no events like Team Australia participating in.
Not really, no.
Okay, Finn, what about New Zealand?
Yeah, we're basically two islands. So we, like the North Island and the South Island, both send a team to the ANZTC, and that's basically as big as like international events that we really go to. But then neither of them is actually under like the Team New Zealand banner. It's like Australia's states. That we've just been split because geographically it was too hard for us to have one team spread across the whole country.
Right. Okay, and so how many teams in total are there in the ANZTC? Well, it's 8 teams.
I believe there was 10 this year.
Yeah,
there was 10 this year. Yeah,
because we cut to top 4.
Yeah, so there was the there's all of the different states within Australia and the territories, as well as the 2 islands of New Zealand.
Okay, so it's just my geography that sucked. And are the state teams a thing? So, like, is it just people ganging up for the event specifically, or is there like
no? So
a little bit
it's sort
more
of a
to
state
it?
of origins sort of situation where in order to participate on a state team, you have to be a resident of that state. So, for example, I was the captain of the Victorian team, which is my home state, and we put together a team with all of the top players within our state, and then we compete against all of the other states. So even though Team Australia has people from the Western Australian team and the Victorian team and the New South Wales team, it's for that event, we all are separated.
Okay, yeah, but that means that for that event, there is also like a selection for each of the state, right? So
Correct,
it's not
yeah.
like anyone can form a team and just go participate. It is a very
Correct,
much
yeah.
a...
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's actually quite interesting. So, Finn, when did the team become final? And if you could introduce the players by saying a couple of words about them.
So we had 7 finalized, and then we wanted to finalize, but then all the data slate and stuff got rumored, so we were like, okay, we'll wait there. And then in the end, we picked the last player based on the factions that they played. All of their factions kind of made it through well, and a couple of the other players, their factions didn't make it through very well. So we've got David Gaylard on our team. Lives in England, but comes from New Zealand. Has played a lot of major events and for kind of the Northern Hemisphere. I assume most people know who he is. Then we've got Alex Taus, who's returning from last year, and he also is captain of the ANZTC South team. We've got Hayden Corrich, who's played ANZTC since I think the beginning, when New Zealand actually used to be good and beat Australia. Then Dan Hayden, he's also been playing teams for a very, very long time. We've got Michael Taylor, who's been playing like in teams events now, probably competitively for the last 3 years, and he's also traveled to like some of the smaller like 5-man team events in Australia. We've got Jonty Larson, who is returning from last year's team. Then we've got Cam Wilkinson, who was our last pick for based on the factions who he's played, and then myself.
All right. Thank you. And Dean, the same request to you.
Okay, so we've got returning WTC players. We've got Matt Morrisoli and Jeremy Martino. So you'd probably all be relatively familiar with these guys. They've been to WTC a whole bunch of times, performed really well. Both of them were on the winning team, the team that Australia won the event. So really strong players there. They'll also be doing a lot of our pairings and stuff like that. They're part of sort of the leadership of the team. And then also from my home state, Victoria, we've got myself as captain and Reese Cunningham, who's a bit of a sort of a rising star in Australian 40K. He's performing exceptionally well of late, so he's going to be one to watch. Then we've got the captain of the Western Australian ANZ TC team, who they came second this year, so top performer there. That's Lockie Rigg. And then he's bringing 2 Western Australians with him, Jordan Beresford and Callum German. So really strong players from the other side of the country. And then our final player is Josh Brody, who's coming from New South Wales. He's been somebody who's participated in the ANZTC for many, many years. I met him at one of my first ever tournaments. So we go way back, very strong player. And then for coaches, we're bringing in Lawrence Gutierrez and Dalton Nugent from Victoria. They're part of the Risky Rollers, who do, amazing YouTube channel with live streams and event coverage and that sort of stuff. So they're coming on as coaches. We've also got Adam Batista from Western Australia and Oliver Johnson from Queensland. So really strong team of 12 great lads.
Okay, excellent stuff. Right, and what's the target or expectation for this year then for Team Australia?
So there's the target and the expectation are probably 2 different things. The target is obviously the gold. It would be fantastic to take that gold medal again. But obviously that's obviously a lofty goal. So whether or not we're able to pull that off is another question entirely. But the sort of expectation is probably somewhere in the top 10 range. We've lost a couple of key players that were pivotal to our success in the previous years because career commitments, family commitments, those sorts of things. So, life does what it does and gets in the way. But I'm a firm believer that Australia's got a very, very deep talent pool, and we've been able to pull in some really, really strong players. So I think we're coming with a team that's roughly as strong as it was in the years that we got very fantastic results. So I see no reason that we can't back that up.
Sure, 100%. And Finn, what about New Zealand? You've had quite a promising debut last year. So what are the expectations, targets for this year's event?
Yeah, so we've actually talked about this in detail as a team. And to start off with, we were like trying to put, like numbers as like placings as a like measure. And we actually got to the point where we're like, like a couple of things can go wrong in terms of like who you play. And just because you've lost to 2 really great teams, for example, and placed lower than that expected result, is it actually a failure? So we've actually kind of just gone with we want to build from what we started last year and just kind of set building blocks for teams for the future as well. And make sure that we basically just get a team back every year because that's how we think we're going to do better.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a goal as good as any. Right. So last year we've had the release of 10th edition shortly before the cutoff. Now we've also had heaps of changes shortly before rules cutoff. So what do you guys think of that? Is it challenging in terms of team selection and preparation? Finn?
Sorry. Yeah, to be fair, like when all the information dump comes at once, it takes a little while to analyze everything, but like give it kind of a week and a half, and everyone's ideas kind of start getting shared around. It hasn't actually been too bad or disruptive for us. There's been a couple of players where we're like, oh, faction wise, what are we doing? But then a couple of players that also answered faction questions for us. So I don't think it was too disruptive to us.
Okay, and Dean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I would sort of mirror what Finn said there. I mean, with our team selection process, we don't focus so much on factions. We don't really care because most people, when they're at that top of their game, they're able to sort of pivot factions relatively rapidly. So we basically just made sure we had the most adaptive players, the most flexible players, and the strongest players, so that no matter what comes our way, we'll be able to rapidly react to it. I think that's one of Australia's great strengths, to be honest. And thinking outside of the box and taking things that are a little bit off meta is something that we're quite proud of. It's part of our national identity. So when a data slate comes out like this and it flips everything on its head and turns the world into chaos, that's where we're like, yep, this is our time to shine.
Okay, yeah, I was curious about that. It's a question I like to ask. So, do you think that a large amount of changes shortly before the cutoff does it play to your strengths? And apparently, I guess it does.
Yeah, I'd definitely say that that's one of the things that Australia does really, really well is just because we're sort of isolated. We're not part of like the greater European meta, and we're not part of like the American meta. We've got our own little weird meta going on.
Yeah.
And as a result, there's a lot more. I mean, this isn't a knock on anybody else, but it feels like we've got a lot more independent, creative solutions than going with the latest tournament results in XYZ country. We sort of just rapidly come up with our own stuff, and that's why a lot of Australian lists over the years, people look at them and they're like, "What's going on there? That list is weird," but then it does really strong performance.
Yeah, no, and I mean your results back it up, right? Especially 2 years ago when you've won, all your lists were like, "What?"
Yeah, and I mean we like to use that to our advantage as well. Like when you look at the list and it's like it's a completely off meta skewed list, it's like nobody will have practiced and prepared into this because they're too busy preparing and practicing into top meta lists. So we sort of like to sort of try to go around the meta and try to end in that podium position from there, and it seems to work well for us. So.
All right. Well, hopefully this year again. Finn, do you have like a favorite change from the recent changes to the rules?
I think the 1CP heroic.
Yes,
It's that's opened up some very, very interesting plays, and it's been a lot of fun, like navigating what you can do with it, but then also what your opponent can do with it. I think that's probably my favorite change.
Okay. Oh, well, I've been hearing that one yesterday when I was doing the Germany-Belgium episode as well. So interesting to hear it again. Dean, what about you? Any favorites?
I tend to agree that heroic intervention change is massive. But I think probably the bigger change in this new 0.5 edition is the missions. The missions are very different. The way that scoring works now, a lot of the cards are a lot harder to achieve. So you either have to sort of lean really hard into having units that can achieve those missions, or lean really hard the other way and go, I'm just going to kill my opponent, kill their ability to score missions, and we're going to have a really low scoring game, but I'm still going to beat them out on points. I think that is probably going to have a greater impact to the meta game as a whole.
Yeah, and so are you happy with the fact that we have new missions and they've been changed? I mean, throughout 9th edition, I think the game grew a little bit stale. You just had your take and holds. And then we've also got a whole bunch of new primary missions. So do you like that change? Do you think it's good for the game?
Yeah, I love the new changes.
Okay. Finn, what about you? What's your take on the new secondary deck and the new primary?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I like that every mission has it's not just chilling rain, because you always like look at the card deck in Leviathan and you're like, well, what's the point in having these cards? Because it's literally like this mission, Chilling Reign. And now that every mission has something, I think it's also just a very interesting thing that you kind of just have to think about a lot more. And yeah, I've quite enjoyed playing the mission deck so far.
Okay, and what do you think of the fact that the WTC missions are now taken straight from the Pariah Nexus pack that G-Dubs released?
I think it's actually quite good that it seems that worldwide, it doesn't matter where you go, we're getting kind of like a unanimous mission pack. It's been also like in maybe 2 years ago, like 3 years ago, when we were starting to really ramp up competitive 40K in New Zealand, there was still like tournaments where you'd go to where people would just make up their own missions and this sort of thing. So you'd be just playing all these different game types and you'd be building all these different types of armies, which it's a lot of work. And the fact that you can kind of play a singles event, and like in New Zealand, we're starting to adopt a lot more WTC style events as well. It's been really quite good. And it means that people who are trying out WTC for the first time, they're just used to playing like the standard G-Dub missions. It's I think it's been quite good.
Yeah, it's an easier transition, right?
Yeah.
And Dean, what about Australia? What do you guys play in Australia day to day? Is it WTC, G-Dubs, or your own mix?
So it varies. Australia is a big country, so there's different pockets play different games. But by and large, I'd mirror what Finn said. I agree with most of those points. One of my concern with that homogenous approach, where everyone's got the same mission pack, everyone's got the same terrain pack, is it can get a little dull, and that would be my concern. Whereas in previous years, there's been the ITC missions, but then there's been your GW missions, but then there's been your Maelstrom missions, and that means that each event has a unique feel to it. My concern is that if in the years to come, WTC adopt the GW missions, they adopt the GW terrain maps, they adopt the GW FAQs and that sort of stuff, then you've just got everyone in the world is just playing exactly the same thing at every event. And I feel like that has the capacity to sort of steal some of the excitement from tournaments, potentially. That would be my concern. So in Australia, we do have a number of events that like to try to spice things up a little bit. And generally what they'll do is they'll just take they'll use the normal Leviathan missions, but they'll swap one of the mission special rules to something creative and unique themed around that event. So it's like a minimal change where it's something small that's not going to massively impact the meta and the way the game's played, but it's enough to give that event a unique feel. So we have quite a few events that operate under that sort of idea, and I quite like that. It means that every event that you go to feels unique, feels exciting. So yeah, we do a bit of a mix.
Okay, and those additional or swapped out mission rules, is it something like within the spirit of the game, or like smack a kangaroo for a VP?
No, they're generally a lot of them are callbacks to previous rules from previous editions. So they'll be like, there might have been an edition previously where if you were on an objective, you could roll a dice and gain a certain ability from you're eating the warp stone or whatever, like just things like that, where it's a slight change, it's on theme with the event, and it calls back to previous editions. So those who've been playing 40K for 5 to 10 years can be like, I remember when this used to be a thing that we had to do all the time. So they're generally on theme. They're generally pretty fun, and they're generally pretty mild as well. So you're not going to rock up at the event and be like, wow, this is so like ridiculous that I can't even play my army. It's like they're very subtle changes. And yeah, I think it breeds a lot of excitement.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. Finn, what's the Team New Zealand approach to the singles event, the War Masters? So I take it that you probably are going to be in Europe for quite a bit, given that the travel is ridiculously long. And some teams that take it that they forbid their players to play the singles to like not show off any tech. Some encourage it to like for first timers to get the experience in, and then for others it's just too much fatigue build up playing that many 40k across that many days. Do you have like a take on this?
Yeah, so we've basically gone with, if people like, everyone's been encouraged to play the singles, again, like we're flying 27 and a half hours with a 2.5 hour stopover. And so everyone's, primarily everyone's going over there to play Warhammer. So we're really encouraging everyone to play Warhammer. And at the, I don't think we're going to be bringing anything like super innovative. Like there might be some minor changes to our lists, just because like there's some units and things which go in because it's a teams format. But generally, yeah, people will be playing their faction. The way we look at it is it's 6 additional reps with your faction, as opposed to which we feel like we're going to gain more from than trying to hide something.
Sure. And Dean, what about you guys?
Yeah, Finn said it perfectly. It's so at the end of the day, we encourage everyone to participate in the War Masters. If they don't want to, they don't. It's up to each player to understand their limits when it comes to fatigue. Some people could play 40k, 3 games a day for the rest of their life and not get tired. Some people get tired after the first game. So, we're leaving it up to the players to make that decision. But in terms of concealing team tech or anything like that, I'm of the belief that the positives we'll gain from those reps and playing those games outweigh any downside that we would have by people scouting us. So, yeah, we're not particularly worried about revealing tech. So everyone will be encouraged to play and, use that as an opportunity to gather data and finalize our scores and that sort of stuff.
And encouraged to spy on Team Australia. Okay. Yeah. Good stuff. Right. So
Especially
I've now
you,
got...
Dean.
Sorry, what was that?
Especially Dean.
Yeah, I need the practice.
Right. So time for a bit of a comedy relief. So on this series, we do have questions around national dishes and whether the people originating from these countries think that the dish is the best in the world. So Google's telling me that Australia's national dish is a roast lamb. So for a change, I actually understand what the dish is. Dean, would you agree that's the national dish of Australia?
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay, interesting. So what would
I actually Googled that as well before this, and I was like, no way, that's not our national dish. We've actually appointed one of our coaches this year is going to be our culture officer. And basically, we're bringing a bunch of Australian culture to the event, and we're going to be handing it out to our opponents throughout the round. Things like Vegemite on toast, things like some Aussie beers are going to be there. But the big one is, shoeies. Now the big one is Tim Tams. Tim Tams, I think that's one of Australia's number one unique identifiable pieces of cuisine. So we're going to be bringing a whole pack of Tim Tams for each team, and we're going to be sharing our culture that way.
So what is that?
A Tim Tam. It's like a biscuit with chocolate wrapped around it, and there's like nougat cream in the middle. They're fantastic.
Okay. And do you bake them yourselves, or they come in packs?
No, it's like a pack. It's a purchasable pack. So we'd be probably buying about 30 packs of them and putting them in a suitcase and flying them over. And
fair enough.
Dishing them out.
Save one for me, please. And
yes,
would you say those are the best cookies in the world?
Oh, for sure.
Okay, well, throwing out best cookies, that's ambitious. Right. Finn, maybe roast lamb is your national dish, because according to Google, top 1 search, New Zealand doesn't have a single national food, is what it says.
Yeah, it's basically Australia steals it all, like the pavlova.
Yeah, pavlova's the second result here. So, and I've not had desserts come up in this. So, would you say it's a national dish? And do you guys like desserts that much?
Like it's a pretty popular dish, especially around Christmas time. I assume it's the same in Australia.
Yeah.
But yeah, like a good pavlova is very good, but like it's not something that I would say personally. Like, it's my favorite thing in the world. But like a good pavlova is very, very nice.
Okay, well, I didn't expect talking about sweets today, so I'm not as much prepared. It's usually like heavy dishes with lots of oil and all that stuff. Okay. Last but not least, guys, if you've got any social media pages for your teams you want to share where people can follow how you perform at the event and general preparations and stuff like that, any sponsors you want to thank, now is the time. So let's start with Team Australia.
So we've got a Facebook page, just Team Australia on Facebook. We've also got the Risky Rollers is our major sponsor this year. They have a YouTube channel and Facebook page and all the good socials, and they're going to be doing a lot of live coverage throughout the lead up to the event and at the event itself. So check out riskyrollers.com. They've got all of I'm not sure if it's .com.au or if it's just .com. But check them out on Facebook if you want, or YouTube, and that's a great place to keep up to date with the happenings of Team Australia.
All right, good stuff. And Finn, what about Team New Zealand?
We've also got a Facebook page. It's just Team New Zealand 40K. And we've got a few sponsors this year, which have been, really helpful to getting us over there. We've got Games Roost, which is like a local hobby store. Then the Gaming Arena, actually from Australia, but we've done a lot of work together with them for running our own events. And then we've also, there's one more and I've forgotten it. Now this is bad. Very bad.
Doody-doody-doo.
Sorry, off the top of my head, I cannot remember who the last one is. Like our little organizational group, Kraken Wargaming is also sponsoring the team. They ran an event to help fundraise money for the team as well. We've got a little bit of money to help us.
Okay, well, you can look up in your notes the sponsor and now actually ask Dean a bonus question that only now just occurred to me. So, are there a lot of people following the WTC live in Australia, given the time difference and the fact that it's probably the middle of the night when the majority of the games are played?
There'll be a lot of people that will stick around. They'll make sure that they're catching the rounds as the results come in. But yeah, the time difference is a significant challenge. So a lot of people it'll be the first thing they'll check when they wake up, or that sort of thing. But yeah, we try to keep people up to date as best as we can, so that as soon as they wake up, all the information they need is there. But after the years of Australia performing quite well over the past 3 years, there's a real hunger for that national pride and people wanting to see Australia do really well. So there's a lot of people that are very, very keen to chew in on those, live streams.
Okay, cool. Right. Finn, what about in New Zealand? Is the WTC gaining more popularity, and the team and the performance that you're putting in?
Yeah, so teams has actually become very, very popular in New Zealand. There was an 85-man team event just recently. So it just seems that teams in New Zealand manages to get much larger numbers because people are happy, if they can just play in their friend group. They just seem to attend those sorts of events. And I think, with how well New Zealand did last year and winning best new team, the following from New Zealand is pretty positive. So I think we'll have a good backing back home, but the time zone difference for us is awful. I think we're 11 hours time different at the moment.
Okay. Right, guys, we're going to wrap up. So again, thanks to our sponsors as well, the Army Painter and Weyland-Yutani. Thank you, Dean, for joining and representing Team Australia here. And thank you, Finn, for representing Team New Zealand.
Thanks for having us, mate.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. Guys, if you like what we do, please make sure to like, follow, subscribe, etc., and consider becoming a patron as well, as the patrons make all of this possible. For now, we're signing off, and we'll see you guys in Belgium. Bye-bye.